Welcome to Bird for Joy, a show about discovering all the different ways that bird watching can bring joy into our lives. I'm Candilynn Fite, your gracious host and fledgling birder. Here at Bird for Joy, we focus on listening and watching the birds around us, being curious and learning what the birds have to teach us about joy, life, and ourselves. So grab your favorite beverage, settle on your perch, and let's get into today's episode. Welcome back to Bird for Joy. Today will be a continuum of last week's episode, where I shared the personal encounter story of a young barred owl. I mentioned that I had read a few online articles reporting how the barred owl is a threat to the northern and California spotted owl species, and recent barred owl attacks on humans. Let me begin by saying that I don't like arguing for the sake of a good debate. And in the past few years, I've made it a point to avoid conflict and drama. Life is too short to walk around with your feathers ruffled. But with that being said, I also hate to see and hear of someone, or in this case, an animal, being harassed or hurt when they are unable to defend themselves. This was the most difficult episode I have yet prepared for, mostly because the subject is not joyful. But I also treasure the barred owl. I couldn't hold back. I had to speak up. When I started preparing for today's episode, and combing through the data online, I did not anticipate the overwhelming amount of negative information out there regarding the barred owl, my spark bird, the bird that catapulted my spontaneous birdwatching to serious birdwatching. I also had no idea that this issue had been going on for decades. Because the majority of the material I found focused on the controversies of the barred owl invading the spotted owl's territory in the West, the two articles I'd read from this past year about barred owl attacks seemed to shrink in importance. I am not saying that the individuals wounded in the incidents did not suffer, but in both cases, the owl was merely defending its territory. Like most wild animals, owls defend territory, their nests, and their young. Unfortunately, sometimes we humans wander a little too close. So, whereas I am not trying to minimize the issue of keeping a safe distance between humans and wildlife, what I found in relation to the barred owl and its western migration was far more horrifying. The pessimism and biased opinions I continued to uncover about the threat of the barred owl over the spotted owl alarmed me. I found much of the rhetoric used when describing the barred owl quite offensive. Phrases and words such as, and I am quoting, bully birds, vicious, a winged invasive species, owls on the prowl, invaders of the western forests, threatening, aggressive, and barred owls are the spotted owl's worst enemy. Now, the worst part is, these aren't just thoughts and opinions of citizens. They are from conservationists, ecologists, environmentalists, biologists, large logging corporations, Audubon societies, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and our federal government. When the issue involves big business, money, and politics, you know it's gonna get ugly. Unfortunately, it already has. Since 2012, in the Pacific Northwest area, thousands of barred owls have been eliminated in experimental cull. Here's a step-by-step on how they are removing the owls. At night, recordings of the barred owls' calls are played over a loudspeaker in hopes of luring the birds out into the open. Armed with a 12-gauge shotgun, the shooter waits. By the way, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife calls this a management tool, and they say that this is the most effective and quote-unquote humane way of eliminating the birds. Once the bird comes into view, they are sighted in and shot. The decision to remove barred owls by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service came after many years of what they claimed as research by a study group they formulated called the Barred Owls Stakeholder Group, alongside and including a couple of big players in the logging industry. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service was granted permits to work around the Migratory Species Act in order to remove barred owls from particular areas by shooting them. One thing I believe is important to point out is that from everything that I have read, the northern spotted owl's decline began way before the barred owl began heavily populating the forests. Most agree the spotted owl's decline started due to the destruction of the old-growth forests by logging in the Pacific Northwest. I will point out that the United States is the second largest timber producer and consumer of the world, although some of the sources claim that the United States is the largest. Of course, the timber industry in the Pacific Northwest claims the decline of the spotted owl is not caused by logging. They say it is because the non-native intrusion of the barred owl. Unfortunately for the barred owl, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has adopted the same mindset. I cannot help but feel like the barred owl is being used as a scapegoat so that the timber industry can continue to log in the Pacific Northwest. And in no way, shape, or form can the barred owl fight its own battle with big business or the federal government. The barred owl is native to eastern North America and began moving west at the turn of the 20th century. There is a lot of debate over how and why they headed west. It is believed that they migrated across the Great Plains in the early 1900s, using forests that were planted to manage wildfires and act as windbreaks to avoid natural disasters, such as the devastating Dust Bowl in the 1930s. The barred owls arrived in Washington in the 1970s and then moved south into Oregon and California. How can we justify killing one species to save another? Why do we humans think that we should play a role in deciding which species should prevail, especially when it appears humans are responsible for the issue to begin with? Through this research, I learned the barred owl isn't the only species governmental agencies and so-called conservationists are lethally managing. There are many others. I am sad to admit that the barred owls, who have moved west, will probably lose this battle. Now that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has completed their quote-unquote study, they have concluded that the removal has indeed had a positive impact on the spotted owl, deeming it necessary to continue on with their barred owl management strategy. There is one thing that we can do. We can speak up and have our voices heard. Today, November 17th, 2023, a new draft opened up on the docket at the federalregister.gov website. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is proposing another draft of their barred owl management program. It is open for comments from the public until January 16, 2024, and they are holding 2 virtual public meetings on December 4th and the 14th. I will put a link to this in the show notes. If you are interested in having your voice heard, I urge you to submit your comments and let them know your thoughts. I will also add the links for a few of the articles I read while researching this issue. Please share this episode and the links with anyone else that you know might be interested in helping these magnificent birds. It is possible that together we can make a difference. Thanks for tuning in, y'all. If you are enjoying the show, I would love it if you would follow or subscribe, rate, review, and then let others know about the podcast so we can continue to build a community of like-minded birders. A big shout out to composer Jonathan Boyle for his cheerful show music called Plucking Happy. The spoken lyrics were written and read by me, and the full version with lyrics will follow this episode. Until next time, stay chirpy, my friends, and get outside. Feel the sun upon your face and the wind in your hair, and bird for joy's sake. Bird for joy's sake, when you're needing more, a new beginning, feeling lost, alone, or blue, go into nature. Stroll to the melodious tunes of birdsong. Let it refresh your soul, fill your heart, lift your spirits. Yes, bird, for joy's sake. Witness the winged wonders, flitting, fluttering, playing hide and tweet. Is there anything else so sweet? I think not. We'll save for the chitter-chatter of my own nestlings as they filled my early days, but sigh no more, for they have long left the nest, and I now strive to find myself once again, discovering new things that I do best. Bird, for joy's sake, for our feathered friends have much joy to share, and it doesn't cost a dime, only time. And I don't know about you, but I am willing to give, to have a chance to live out my days, filled with curiosity, hope, and wonder, learning patience, the art of slowing down and being fully present, living in the moment, something I have long strived to achieve. Bird, for joy's sake, and keep looking up. Let their constant cheer infect you, their tenacity provide you with lessons of never giving up and looking on the brighter side of life. Prepare for entertainment with their quirky, chirpy silliness. Oh my, so much cuteness, happiness, and whimsy. You can't help but smile. And suddenly you'll discover worries cease, frustrations fade, chaos calms, and troubles melt away like snow in the spring. You will find yourself looking up and forward into the horizon, surrounded by song, hope, and happiness perched in your heart, feeling renewed and fulfilled. Go out into nature, take a stroll, let the avifauna rejuvenate your soul, and bird, for joy's sake.